Our story tonight begins in the town of Deadwood. The year is 1876. It's early morning. Not dawn, but just before when the sky is still velvet black and the stars blink like forgotten campfires. The town is still, so still you could hear a bootlace snap across the street. So still, even the horses don't snort. The air smells of pine smoke and cold iron, of leather left out too long, of something faintly sweet from the bakery down near Sherman Street, though it won't open for hours. Dust that doesn't move unless the wind asks it to. And above it all, dust that settles on every window pane, dust that lives in shirt cuffs and under nails. In one of the second-story rooms above the general store, a man named Ellery sits by his window, polishing a brass spur. He's not a gunslinger, not an outlaw, not even a preacher or a prospector. And Deadwood, for all its saloons and rustling deals, had quiet if you woke up early enough. He's a cobbler, one of the only in town. He came west, not for gold, but for quiet. Ellery's fingers are calloused and careful. He buffs the spur in slow circles, not because it needs shining, but because mornings like this ask for stillness. Downstairs, the floor creaks. A cat, maybe, or the shopkeeper turning in his sleep. It smells faintly of sagebrush and gunpowder. Deadwood is not a city. It's a skeleton of wooden buildings, stitched together by planks and promises. The buildings lean a little when it rains. The windows rattle when the wind pushes too hard. But everything stands. Mostly, coffee is boiled black over wood fire in tin pots that taste like yesterday's soot. He watches the dust rise from a horse's hooves out by the livery. If you want meat, you shoot it. If you want boots, you trade for them. If you want rest, you earn it. Local ranch hand carries more rope than sense. There are no real streets, just dirt paths with names like Wall and Gold and Maine. You wouldn't last long here if you waited for things to be perfect. Water is fetched in pails from the creek. Outhouses are crooked things, barely fenced, barely private, and truth be told, more dangerous than you'd think. In 1876, more folks fell ill from the flies and filth of those backhouse pits than ever did from a revolver. That's the kind of truth you only whisper, not because it's scary, but because it's just the way things are. Ellery sips from a tin cup warm coffee, no sugar. It's Amos Braxton, not with speed or bullets or shiny badges, but with rhythm, with knowing when to step back, when to stay quiet. Someone will whistle down by the train track that doesn't yet carry trains. When to leave someone be. He leans back in the chair, creaking softly, watching the sky turn pale as tin. He's early, even for him. Heading out toward the northern ridge, maybe clearing his head. The horse walks slow, not tired, just unbothered. Its tail flicks lazily, like it's writing poetry in the morning air. At the far end of town, a saloon lamp still burns. Inside, someone's snoring on the floor. Cards scattered. Boots kicked off. No one'll rob him. Not in Deadwood. Not if he's local. See, this town has a strange code knot, written, not spoken, but understood. You can lie, cheat, bluff, and bet. But if someone helps you up from the dirt, you help them up next time. That's how folks survive here. Because in the Wild West, if you weren't listening, you weren't lasting. Ellery sets down the spur. The town will stir soon. The baker will start her fire. The telegraph office will click to life. And all of it will happen slowly. Because in Deadwood, the dust settles before the people do. There's something about mornings in Deadwood. They don't rush you. They just arrive softly, like the turning of a page. The way light slips through slatted shutters, landing on worn floorboards. The way old dogs stretch their legs in doorways, one paw at a time. It's not sleepy, exactly. Just ... unhurried. Down near the edge of town, just past the tailor's shop and the faded sign for hot baths, an old woman named Alma carries a bucket of water. She walks with small, careful steps, not because she's frail, but because she knows how precious clean water is when you've carried it uphill. Her house leans slightly to the left. The roof slants. The porch groans, but it's home. Alma makes the best blackberry jam in Dakota territory, though no one can agree where she finds berries out here. Some say she grows them in pots behind the outhouse. Others whisper she trades for them with the Lakota. No one asks her directly, because when Alma talks, people listen, and when she's quiet, people respect it. The wind has picked up a little. Not fierce, not wild. Just enough to make the laundry on the line flap like lazy flags. Just enough to make the dust lift and dance briefly in the slanted light. There's no rain in that wind. Just dry earth and old stories. Stories told around fires over beans and bread. Stories that start with back when the tracks stopped in Kansas, and end with a pause and a far-off look. Inside the sheriff's office, Deputy Mullen is dozing in a chair, hat pulled low, boots crossed, rifle leaning against the wall like it's part of the furniture. He's not asleep from laziness, but from knowing when not to act. There's been no brawl this week, no gambling disputes, no horses stolen, no shots fired. That's a gift. In 1876, peace is not assumed. It's earned, one quiet day at a time. The local blacksmith, Jeremiah, is just starting to stoke his forge. You can hear it before you see it. The hollow clang of metal on metal. The gentle whoosh of bellows feeding flame. He works with his shirt sleeves rolled high, sweat already glistening along his forearms. There's soot on his cheek and sparks in his beard. But he moves gently like he's shaping something sacred. Horseshoes, hinges, plowheads, sometimes a pistol plate or a stovetop grate. He knows the weight of every piece before it touches the anvil. Knows which customers pay in coin and which in eggs or favors or help when winter bites. Jeremiah speaks little, but every clang from his shop says something. Kids run past the boardwalk, now barefoot, yelling, chasing a dog that isn't theirs. They hop over puddles that haven't seen water in months. They pretend the alleyways are canyons, and the tumbleweeds are buffalo. A little boy named Thomas wears a tin star on his chest. He guards the bakery with a stick like it's a Winchester. His sister, May, sells imaginary licorice for rocks. This is Deadwood, too. A town full of real trouble, yes, but also imaginary games that grow in the cracks of the wooden planks, that soften the hard corners of a place not meant for children. At the far end of Maine, the newspaper pressed thumps once a slow, mechanical heartbeat. Ink smears the air. A fresh stack of bulletins appears with headlines only half true. Gold strike promising near Spearfish Creek. Stagecoach arrives intact miracle. Local woman swears at cactus wins. No one expects the news to be accurate, only entertaining, and it always is. Ellery steps outside now, boots touching earth, hat pulled down, shadowing his eyes from a sun that's climbing slow but steady. He walks to the well, nods to Alma, waves to Jeremiah, says not a word, doesn't need to. This is how days begin here, not with speeches, but with small, rhythmic kindnesses. And above it all, the dust keeps falling, soft as ash, light as memory, carried in on boots and breezes, settling into wood, grain, and hatbands in long-forgotten corners. It doesn't choke, it doesn't shout, it simply settles. Mid-morning arrives, not with a bell, but with a kind of soft unfolding. The town stretches into the light. Shutters creak open. Chickens cluck lazily in backyards. Someone starts sweeping a stoop. A violin begins to hum from a room above the saloon. Just a few notes, at first fragile, warm, unsure, then bolder. The player is a young man named Silas, a traveler, not quite a drifter, not quite a settler. He's been in Deadwood 6 weeks now, and no one's quite sure what he's after. He plays most mornings fiddle on his knee, hat turned upside down by his feet. The townsfolk don't mind. In fact, many pause just a moment longer outside the saloon to let the music settle on them like mist. They say Silas once played for governors. They say he ran from something, a war, a woman, a crime. They say a lot in Deadwood. But the music is all anyone needs to trust. Across town, at a small table outside the general store, 3 women are stitching coins into the hems of their skirts. It's not a fashion statement, it's for safety. Outlaws don't always check clothing seams, and a few hidden quarters can mean the difference between going hungry or making it to the next town. Little by little, silver disappears under layers of cloth stitched so tightly it jangles only if you sprint. They talk while they work, not gossip, just stories. One lost a brother to a bar fight in Cheyenne. One used to be a school teacher back east. One still hopes to open a boarding house here in Deadwood. Their fingers move like clockwork, even as their voices soften. There's something almost ceremonial about it. In the far pasture, a cattle dog barks, then quiets. The cows barely move. The breeze shifts and carries the faint scent of sagebrush and river water rare, but welcome. And from the hills above town, the faintest cloud of smoke rises. Someone is camping there, watching, maybe, or just resting. Deadwood has always had watchers, miners, scouts, outlaws, sometimes even soldiers in plain clothes, sent to map the land or monitor movement, but they rarely come down. The town is its own machine, dusty, rickety, functional in the way of a wagon wheel, long worn but still turning. There's a young girl named Clara, not yet 10, who sits on the steps of the printing office and reads scraps of paper, old headlines, faded ink, torn sermons, anything with letters. She traces each word with her finger, mouths it silently, takes her time. She's never been to school. There isn't one, but she's learning just the same. Her mother calls her Little Owl, and the name fits. Wide eyes, quiet presence, always listening, always curious. Clara folds the paper into a square and tucks it into her pocket as if saving it for later, like a favorite piece of hard candy. A train is rumored to arrive by fall. They've been saying that since spring. Some think it'll never come, but tracks are being laid, mile by mile, as slowly as a shadow moves when you're not watching. The thought of it, a train steaming into this dusty cradle of wooden storefronts and stray dogs, seems too modern, too loud. Still, it's coming, maybe, and folks plan for it in small ways. They buy extra cloth just in case. They brush their teeth with baking soda in case they have to smile for someone rich. They dream of telegrams, newspapers, shiny new boots from somewhere back east. But Deadwood, even with dreams, doesn't forget itself. It stays grounded. It knows the wind can change, knows the gold might run out, knows that sometimes the only way to survive is to walk slow, keep your eyes open, and never trust a warm breeze not to carry sand. And so the day goes on, quietly, softly. The violin drifts, the dust dances, and the sun moves across the sky with no urgency at all. The sun now hangs high overhead, not harsh, but steady. Its light presses down across the rooftops and stretches long shadows from awnings and barrels and porch rails. It's the hour when shopkeepers lean on broomsticks, when horses nap with one back leg cocked, and when sweat beads along brows and runs slow behind shirt collars. Nothing is rushed here, not even the heat. At the edge of town, a man named Ezra is digging a well. He's older than most. Wrists like ropes, eyes like flint. Every day, he digs 3 more feet, then lines the sides with stones, laid one by one like prayers, the kind that hold water. No one asked him to build the well, but he heard that come autumn, they'd run short. And so he digs. Not for pay, not for thanks, just because he's still strong enough. Sometimes a boy comes to watch him, Thomas, the one with the tin star. He offers to help, but Ezra just nods toward a patch of shade. Watch the bucket, he says, and Thomas does. For an hour, he sits still and counts how many times the rope swings, how often Ezra wipes dust from his face, how the earth changes color the deeper they go. Over at the saloon, it's too hot for cards. The dealer, a tall woman named Ruth, fans herself with a wanted poster. Her boots are on the table, and her eyes are half closed behind tinted spectacles. She used to ride with a stagecoach company as a guard. Now she pours drinks and makes sure the piano player shows up sober. Ruth doesn't mind the quiet. She likes slow days, a scene too much fast, she says, and leaves it at that. Outside, the wind changes. Not much, just a ripple, but enough to make the heat shift in your clothes. It smells of dry pine and canvas. Maybe someone's riding into town. Sure enough, by late afternoon, hooves echo down the main road. A man on a roan horse, dusty from hat to boot. His name is Levi. He brings mail, mostly. Letters wrapped in oilskin, tied with string. Sometimes packages books, soaps, a rare bolt of fabric. Today he carries a single parcel, wrapped in burlap, marked with wax. No name, just Deadwood. Levi doesn't ask questions. He just drops it at the post counter and tips his hat. Then he waters his horse, stretches his back, and buys a boiled egg and a cigar before heading on. He stays only 20 minutes, enough time to nod hello to 3 people and goodbye to none. That's the way of couriers. They come and go like stories left untold. In a quieter part of town, past the livery and the abandoned chapel, there's a cabin with blue curtains. Inside it, 2 sisters sew by candlelight, even though the window lets in plenty of sun. They say it helps them concentrate. The older one, Hattie, embroiders flowers onto pillowcases. She sells them for nickels to travelers who miss home. The younger Lark makes dolls out of corn husks and leftover cloth. Each has a name. Each has a voice only Lark can imitate. They don't talk much to outsiders, but their porch is always swept clean, and they sometimes leave fresh bread on the windowsill for the hungry. Deadwood has its rough corners, but it also has these small rooms where gentleness lingers like lavender on quilted hems. And the sun keeps inching down. Shadows stretch longer now. The breeze grows cooler. A few folks glance at the hills, as if the mountains are watching them back, not out of fear, but respect. Because out here, you don't own the land. You just share its silence. Evening begins with the sound of matches, soft scratches of flint, faint flares of light, lanterns being lit one by one behind dusty windows, on swinging porches, inside kitchens that smell of salt pork and ash. The town takes a deep breath, the kind you take before turning a page, before resting your hands in your lap and letting the day settle where it may. Outside the barber's shop, the rocking chair creaks again, except to sip water from a chipped tin cup and whistle now and then, tuneless but steady. He used to cut hair, shave beards, and listen to confessions. Now he mostly rocks, eyes half shut, mind full of things no one else will ever hear. They say his razor's still sharp, but he doesn't use it much anymore. Only when the preacher comes to town, or when someone needs to look decent for a funeral. He hums as he rocks, a low sound, like wind winding down the canyon. Further up the road, the smithy glows dim with dying coals. The blacksmith, Abel, has finished for the day. His hands are raw, and his apron smells of soot. But there's satisfaction in his slowness now. He sharpens tools the old way by feel, by rhythm. His forge is small, but the anvils carry memory. He says every dent tells a story. Some hammers have names. Tonight he reheats a coffee tin left from morning. No sugar, no milk, just bitterness and heat. But Abel doesn't drink for comfort. He drinks for continuity. In the alley behind the butcher's, a cat slinks. Not a pet, but not a stranger. She is striped like shadows and walks like she owns the hour. She pauses where the boards are warm, stretches long, and listens to boots on gravel, to a door being bolted, to the tiny whistle of bread cooling on a sill. She listens like only creatures with no words can, intently, completely, and then she vanishes. At the edge of the creek, children toss stones, not to skip them, just to hear the splash. They don't speak. They've spent all their words in play. Now they're quiet. Damp shoes, muddy fingers, eyes following each ripple as it fades into hush. Their parents call them from porches, not with anger, just routine. And one by one, they drift back home, leaving only footprints and the scent of pond water in the air. A bell rings once from the saloon. Ruth, the tall dealer, has changed into her darker vest. The poker table is ready. Candles flicker in empty whiskey bottles. And Silas, the violinist, spun back on his stool. Tonight, he plays slower, something longing, something tender, not a song anyone knows, but one that feels remembered. Outside, a couple dances in the dirt. No music, but what drifts from the windows. No audience, but the sky. As stars begin to take their places overhead, the whole town seems to lean into the stillness, and Deadwood becomes something else entirely. Not just a mining town, not just a place people pass through, but a cradle of breath and bone and dust, held together by the quiet dignity of survival. Our story tonight moves deeper into the hush, where doors close gently, where lamp oil burns low, and where everything not said begins to matter most. The sky is darker now, but not fully black. It glows in places with the last pale whispers of twilight. Above the rooftops, stars begin to settle like ash, soft, slow, familiar. In the boarding house at the edge of Main Street, Miss Loretta finishes her last round. She checks the locks, tightens the curtains, extinguishes all but one lamp at the stairwell. Her slippers make no sound as she moves. The floorboards know her steps. On the second floor, a man sleeps with one hand around a journal. Below him, a widow from St. Louis dreams in fits and starts. The scent of wild sage tucked beneath her pillow. Loretta doesn't disturb them. She just walks the hall one last time, a thin shawl over her shoulders, the hem brushing the wood like a whispered lullaby. When she reaches her room, she sighs, not with sadness, just with gravity, the kind that gathers at day's end. In the stable, the horses breathe in unison. They shift now and then, but not much. Hooves thud gently against packed straw. Tails swish like lullabies. A stable hand, young Ely sleeps near the back wall, his head resting on a burlap sack of oats. He was meant to go home hours ago. But the scent of the animals, the creak of wooden beams, the velvet dark, they kept him still. And then they kept him asleep. In his dreams, he's riding, not running, not racing, just riding, across tall grass, beneath a sky as wide as mercy. The telegraph office sits silent tonight. No tapping, no wires buzzing, no news from east or west. The machine rests under a cloth. The desk is neat, and a single candle sits unlit on the sill, as if waiting for someone to return. But no one does. Not tonight. And the silence says more than any message might. At the outskirts of town, the wind picks up slightly. It runs through dry sagebrush, over stone markers at the edge of a modest cemetery, through open window shutters left ajar. It smells of iron and cedar, of long rides, of stories too old to retell, and it hums like a lullaby from the earth itself. Back in town, Ruth finishes her last hand of cards. The piano player has gone. The tables are clear, and only one candle remains burning behind the bar. She doesn't speak. She just gathers the deck, slides it into a box, and lowers the lantern's wick until all that's left is a glow. Outside, her boot sounds soft against a porch. She lights a cigarette, leans on the railing, and looks out over a town barely breathing. Still here, she says. Not to anyone. The night. And the night, in its wisdom, doesn't answer. It never does. It only holds. Midnight folds over Deadwood like a wool blanket. Not heavy, just complete. The kind of darkness that hushes even the crickets. Shutters sway gently on crooked hinges. An oil lamp flickers in the sheriff's office, where no one is awake, but the law still holds its quiet vigil. Above, the stars hang low and soft, mirroring the few scattered lanterns left burning across the town. This is the hour when no one walks, not for fear, but for reverence. Deadwood, for now, belongs to the silence. Ezra, the well-digger, lies in his cot. The back of his hands rest on his chest, calloused palms up. Outside his small cabin, the bucket still swings gently in the breeze, as if finishing a rhythm only he can feel. He isn't asleep, not fully, but he's not awake either, somewhere in between. His last thought before drifting is simple. How much deeper the well must go, and how still the earth felt under his boots today. In the distance, a coyote calls. Once, then again. It's not a cry of hunger. It's just a note. A sound stitched into the fabric of the plains. No dogs bark back. No humans stir. They know the sound means nothing tonight. Just another voice in the vast cathedral of dusk. The church is empty, as usual, but the door isn't locked. It rarely is. Inside, dust motes drift like soft snowflakes through moonbeams slicing across the aisle. A Bible sits open on the pulpit, not for a sermon, just because someone turned to Psalm 23 2 weeks ago and no one's touched it since. A robin nested in the rafters months ago. Her chicks are gone now, but feathers still line the beams. Sometimes the sacred doesn't speak. It just remains. Back in the corner of the town, Miss Hattie threads her final loop of embroidery. She's used blue thread to night deep as twilight. The flowers she stitches don't exist in the world, but they bloom just the same on linen left to cool by the window. Her sister Lark is asleep beside a dozen dolls. They're lined up in perfect rows on the shelf, each one quiet, each one watching. The candle burns low, and the room is steeped in the soft smell of lavender and ironed cotton. Overhead, the wind shifts again, higher this time. The kind of wind that dances on tin roofs, lifts dust in slow spirals, and slips through cracks in doors to tell the town that morning still waits, but not yet. This is the deep part of night, where memory and dream blur, where nothing moves unless it must. Deadwood sleeps, and it is, somehow, more alive in this stillness than in all the busy hours that came before. It's the hour just before color returns to the world. A blue so faint you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking, unless you were still, unless you had sat with the night long enough to hear the difference between silence and stillness. Deadwood doesn't stir yet, but it listens. The boards of porches cool. The smoke in chimneys thins to ghost threads, and the last of the stars begin to nod. In the back room of the general store, the ledger lies open. A pencil rests inside it, mid-sentence. Someone had meant to finish calculating a shipment of flour and nails, but the figures could wait. In towns like this, they always did. There's a small window in that room, round and fogged at the edges, and through it the hills rolled gently into shadow. The shopkeeper, old Mags, snores softly in her chair. 1 foot bare, one hand curled around a cup long gone cold. She doesn't dream of gold or riches. She dreams of fence posts, of open fields, of her childhood in Tennessee, of wind that smells like apples. The bank sits locked tight, as always, but the vault itself, it hasn't been opened in 3 weeks. There's barely anything in it. A few silver coins, a wedding ring someone pawned for train fare. But it's still guarded by principle more than by profit. And every night, a man named Jonas dozes on a cot behind the back wall, badge still pinned to his vest. A shotgun leaning nearby, though it's never been fired. He doesn't expect trouble. But in Deadwood, folks still remember how quickly calm can turn. And so he sleeps, one eye nearly open, beneath a window that leaks moonlight like a slow dripping faucet. Down by the tracks, the station lantern flickers. The next train won't come until late tomorrow, but that doesn't stop the mice from exploring its empty wooden benches. Their tiny feet tap quietly over the floorboards, like a miniature ballroom for shadows. Someone left a suitcase behind, tied shut with fraying rope. No one's dared open it, not because of fear, just respect. In towns like Deadwood, people let forgotten things stay forgotten, at least for a little while. The sky grows softer now. You wouldn't call it dawn yet, but it's no longer night. There's a change in the birdsong, not volume, but shape, a new note, a new curve to the call, and with it, a breath moves through the town. Not a wind, but an inhale, the kind that comes when you've rested well, when your bones are heavy, but your heart is quiet. Soon, footsteps will return. Boots on gravel, brooms sweeping porches, children's voices behind screen doors. But not yet. Deadwood waits. And as it does, it teaches you something gentle, that even the toughest places need time to rest, that even the dust knows how to lie still before it dances again, and that sometimes it is not survival that shapes a town, but how it pauses between one heartbeat and the next. A light wind stirs the cotton curtains in the upstairs window of the boarding house. They drift in, then out, like the quiet breathing of the building itself. Miss Loretta is already awake, not rushing, just aware. She doesn't rise yet. Instead, she watches the soft shadows shift on the floor. Patterns made by early light sneaking through the slats. She has no alarm clock, no need. In Deadwood, you wake when the world stirs around you, not when a bell tells you to. In the alley behind the saloon, a cat stretches long and low, one eye half shut, the other scanning for movement. She doesn't hunt, not yet. She just watches. The wood beneath her is warm from last night's lanterns, and the scent of spilled whiskey still lingers. She curls again, tail across nose. The day will come, but not now. Even the animals in Deadwood respect the pace of morning. A man named Cyrus opens his eyes in the bunkhouse near the edge of camp. He slept with his boots on again. No one tells him otherwise. He sits up slowly, adjusts the brim of his hat, which never left his head, and listens, not for voices, not for danger, but for absence. The absence of trouble, the absence of dust rising, the absence of anything that might make this day different than the last. He smiles. He'll take it. Back in the heart of town, the blacksmith arrives early, not because of work, because of rhythm. He lights the coals, but doesn't strike them yet. Instead, he rolls up his sleeves, ties back his hair, and takes a sip from his tin cup. The cup's been dented since '74. He won't replace it. Says it tastes better busted. He watches the forge glow, the heat pulsing in steady waves. There's comfort in watching fire wake up slow. Outside the post office, a boy named Lem is already pacing. He has a letter in his vest, worn, folded twice, and tied with a red ribbon. He's too young to fight, too young to vote, but not too young to write. The letter is for his sister, back in Kansas City. He writes to her weekly, even though he isn't sure if she still lives there. But habit is hope. And Lem, though young, understands both. Across the street, a small chapel bell rings once. Not loud, not urgent, just a nudge. It's Sunday. Or maybe it isn't. No one checks the calendar too closely, but someone still rings the bell, and people still listen, not for sermons, just for pause, for the reminder that life moves slow in the places where dust settles deep. Sunlight stretches like honey across the floorboards of the bakery. Ada, the baker's wife, is already up. She moves slowly, not from age, but from knowing. Knowing how dew rises best when it's not rushed. Knowing which drawer holds the spoon with a worn handle. Knowing how to braid a loaf by feel, not by sight. The scent of yeast and wood smoke lingers in the air, and the floor beneath her bare feet is warm from the oven's belly. She hums a tune with no words, just a sound, like steam escaping a kettle, like a lullaby left over from the night. At the livery, a stable boy brushes a gray mare. The mare flicks her tail, but doesn't move. She trusts him. He knows her favorite spot, just behind the ears, and he whispers to her while he works. Not full sentences, just pieces. You're all right. There we go. No hurry. He hums between words. A quiet rhythm passed down from rancher to rancher, meant more for the hands than the horse, but the mare listens anyway. The sheriff steps onto the porch of his office, mug in hand. He doesn't speak, he doesn't nod, he just watches. Not for criminals, not for lawbreakers, just for patterns. How the same dog crosses the same street at the same time. He sips, winces slightly, too hot. Then sips again. The badge on his chest isn't polished. It doesn't need to be. Respect here is earned by silence, not shine. They just toss them, watching for the hop, the splash, the ripple. Their laughter is quiet, almost like birdsong, never loud enough to scare the frogs. They've never seen a photograph of themselves, but they know what joy looks like on each other's faces. that's enough. In the saloon, the piano remains untouched. No player today. But the lid is open, and a thin shaft of light rests on the keys. A mouse crosses between them. A soft patter, a silent note. No music plays, but the silence hums with memory. A wedding waltz from last spring. A soldier's farewell tune, K. The melody of a town that sings only when it must. Deadwood breathes now, not in a rush, but fully. It is a town built on gamble and grit, but held together by habit and hush. No one here expects peace to last, but for now, for this golden morning, it does. And everyone, from horse to child, to outlaw, to widow, lets that peace settle into their bones like dust on an old windowsill. The noon sun slides overhead like a quiet promise, not scorching, not sharp, just steady. It casts long lines from telegraph poles, etching shadows like careful pen strokes across the dust. The telegraph office hums faintly. Click, click, click. Then silence. The operator, young Tom, leans back in his chair, hat tipped low, a folded sandwich in his lap, one hand resting near the key, just in case. He doesn't rush. The messages will wait. In Deadwood, even the wires pause. Up on Boot Hill, the wind gathers. It doesn't wail, not like the songs say. It sighs between stone and soil, between names carved shallow and names long forgotten. The wind finds its way. A crow hops between two markers, then takes flight. The wooden cross beside it leans, its letters worn, faint. James, shot over a mule. No one remembers the mule, but the name remains, alongside the hundreds that built this place with fists, shovels, and chants. Down below, the general store is finally open. Mags has swept the front steps twice, more habit than need. She hums to herself, tapping flour from a tin. Customers drift in, one for nails, one for a thread spool, one just to talk. The bell over the door sings each time, soft, metallic, familiar, a sound more comforting than a hymn. In the corner sits an old jar of peppermint sticks, sun-faded and slightly stuck together. Children press their noses to the glass. They don't ask, but Mags always offers one anyway. By the well, a group of ranch hands lean against barrels. The water's cool, the talk is cooler. Stories traded in slow voices, about a horse too smart to saddle, a storm that came from nowhere, a poker game with a preacher. No one hurries. There's work to be done, but it waits for noonday to soften into afternoon. Even the horses doze, tails twitching in time with dreams. The dust swirls now. A breeze kicks up, lazy but present. It dances through skirts and coat hems, lifts a hat from a fence post, rolls a tumbleweed across the dry road like a whisper on wheels. People watch it. No one stops it. Dust belongs to no one in Deadwood. It simply is. And when the wind rests again, it settles quietly, like ash, like thought, like time. Wood holds its breath just for a moment, not out of fear, but out of reverence, as if the land remembers more than it tells, as if every clapboard wall and rusted hinge knows the names of the men and women who came, who stayed, who vanished like smoke. And the town listens without asking why. The afternoon sun lays down long gold beams through the spaces between buildings. Everything slows, not because it must, but because it can. The street is nearly empty now. A dog stretches across the planks of the boardwalk, one eye open, one ear twitching, but no real concern. Even the flies seem slower, circling in lazy spirals, like they, too, have settled into the rhythm of the hour. Inside the barber's, the chair creaks gently as Mr. Hollis leans back. A young man sits beneath his blade, jaw stiff with nervousness, but the barber's hands are steady. He has done this 1,000 times, each motion practiced, measured, quiet. The hot towel is folded just so. The razor stropped against leather with the whisper-soft shush of steel on hide. And when he speaks, if he speaks, it's in half phrases, low and sure, not conversation, just reassurance. The young man exhales and lets go. At the edge of town, where the grass overtakes the trail, an old woman gathers herbs. Her fingers are worn but nimble. She hums just loud enough to keep the bees from startling. Juniper for a cough, yarrow for wounds, wild mint for nerves. She ties each bundle with a strip of cloth, then tucks them into her basket beside a book missing its cover. No one remembers where she came from, but when babies are sick or fever hits a horse, they always find her. She never hurries. She never forgets. In the schoolhouse, Miss Tenley rings the tiny brass bell. It's not needed. The students are already quiet, heads bent, pencils working. The lesson is geography today. The children trace rivers with charcoal, talking about mountains they've never seen, oceans they've only dreamed of. Outside the window, a blue jay calls once, then vanishes. Miss Tenley lets her fingers brush across the map on the wall, trailing over the borders of faraway places. And for a moment, Deadwood feels like the center of the world. Behind the saloon, in the shadow of the outhouse, a poker game unfolds. No stakes, no real tension. A match is struck. A story is told about a gold claim that turned out to be fool's dust. They laugh quietly, not because it's funny, but because they understand. Everyone here knows what it's like to chase something that isn't there, and to be okay with that. As the sun begins to lean west, the shadows stretch long and thin. Footsteps echo sharper now. Wood creaks louder, but there's no urgency. Just the changing of light, like a page turning. People shift indoors. Doors close gently. Curtains are drawn, but not shut. And the dust, once again, settles, slow, like memory. The first lantern flickers to life at the edge of Main Street. Its glow is small, not much brighter than a star, but it softens the doorway it guards. Others follow. One by the blacksmith's, another outside the boarding house. One in the hands of the preacher, who lights the wick outside the chapel with a practiced turn of the wrist. Deadwood doesn't shine. It glows, low and warm, like the heart of an ember that never quite dies out. In the boarding house kitchen, supper is finished. Plates stacked. Soap bubbles in the basin. The smell of beans and cornmeal still lingers in the air, woven with the sharp sweetness of peppermint leaves kept in a jar near the stove. Lydia, the cook, wipes her hands on her apron and hums as she places a piece of bread beside the door. A small offering for the night mice, not to feed them, but to keep them out of the pantry. She whispers a soft goodnight to no one in particular, then dims the lantern. Outside, a harmonica plays. Somewhere near the fire barrel behind the smithy, a young man draws long, lonesome notes into the settling dusk. Not a song you'd know, not one you'd find on paper, just breath and brass, and a longing too big for words. People don't gather, but they listen, from porches, from behind curtains, from beds where boots are still half lest, and in the quiet between notes, you can hear it, the town listening back. In the stables, the horses shift. Their eyes reflect lantern light. Their ears twitch toward distant sounds. A child tucks a blanket over her pony. It's too warm to need it, but she does it anyway. She pats its nose once, whispers something only they understand, and skips back toward the house, bare feet thudding gently on dirt. The pony exhales, a slow puff of breath into night air that is just starting to cool. At the saloon, the tables are cleared. No music tonight. No arguments. Just the barkeep wiping down the bar, and a stranger nursing a glass he hasn't touched in an hour. They don't speak. Not out of tension, just because words would feel too loud now. The floorboards groan softly as he walks back to his room, each step a little slower than the last. Outside, the sky begins to deepen. From dusty gold to dusk blue, to velvet black. And still, Deadwood does not sleep. It waits. Midnight does not fall in Deadwood. It eases in, like a heavy coat pulled gently over tired shoulders. No rush, no ceremony. The sky now is ink, pin-pricked with stars, the kind that don't twinkle but burn steadily, as if they too are watching. A low breeze moves through the streets, lifting the hem of a curtain, nudging a weathered sign that creaks ever sightly. A candle flickers behind the seamstress's window. She's still awake, sewing buttons onto a child's shirt by the glow of beeswax. She doesn't need to, but her fingers like the rhythm. In the sheriff's office, the lamp is turned low. Sheriff Dodd sits with a coffee gone cold. The jail cell is empty. His boots are off. His eyes scan a week-old newspaper, but he's not reading, just listening. For what? He doesn't know. The air is still. So still, you can hear the ticking of the pocket watch hanging from a nail by the window. He winds it once, then returns to the quiet. Not everything needs fixing tonight. By the chapel, a fox slinks across the steps. It pauses, sniffing the wind. The night is safe. So it moves on. Across gravel, through brush, past the shallow stream where frogs are singing lullabies to no one. Their voices rise and fall with the breeze. A chorus without words, just pulse and pulse and pulse. Even the trees lean in to listen. On the porch of the miners' quarters, an old man rocks slowly. The chair creaks, but not with protest. More like it's remembering. He watches the moon rise over the black hills, watches it hang there, silent, perfect, without needing to explain itself. His hands are still dusty from the shaft, but he hasn't washed them. He doesn't want to lose the feeling of the earth. Not yet. Not until the night finishes its story. Inside the hotel, behind the grandest door Deadwood has ever seen, a woman unpins her hair. She brushes it slowly, each stroke a soft breath in the quiet room. Her trunk sits packed in the corner. Tomorrow she'll leave. But tonight she listens to the floorboards creak below, and to the piano key she pressed by accident earlier, still echoing somewhere in her chest. She doesn't cry. Deadwood isn't that kind of place, but she breathes in deep and lets the dust settle. Before the sun returns, there's a hush so complete, it's hard to believe this town was ever loud. No boots clatter, no bottles clink, even the roosters hesitate. Only the slow, breathing silence, woven into the walls, the roads, the hills. Out beyond the stables, a thin curl of smoke rises from a campfire. It's just embers, now soft, glowing reminders that someone was here not long ago. Maybe a drifter. Maybe someone looking for something they never quite named. The ground around the fire is still warm. The coyotes haven't come close. Inside the livery, the horses begin to shift. One snorts, another stamps. The blacksmith isn't up yet, but his tools are already laid out, arranged the same way they've been every morning for 20 years. Horseshoes, pincers, a small wooden cup for cool water. At the edge of town, the widow Myra opens her shutters. The sky is barely gray, just the faintest whisper of light pressing through the trees. She pours tea into a tin cup, sits on her stoop, and watches the world take shape again. Her cat joins her, tail wrapped around her ankles. There's no rush. Deadwood doesn't wake all at once. It stretches, yawns, lets its bones remember. The post rider is already halfway down the road, dust trailing behind him like a private cloud. He left before dawn, like always. No one sees him go. No one needs to. The letters he carries smell of ink and paraffin. They hold words like soon and safe and yours. And out there, somewhere, someone waits to read them. The wild still holds half the country, but the other half is stitched together with letters. As the sun finally crests the eastern ridge, Deadwood glows again. Not gold this time, but soft amber, like it's been gently polished overnight. Children peek from under quilts. Chickens start to scratch. A hammer rings once against an anvil, not loud, just enough to say, "I'm here." Boots find their way to feet. Doors open wide, and someone begins to whistle something not quite a tune, but close enough. The day begins, not with a bang, but with breath. A slow inhale, and somewhere on the hill, someone carves a name into the bark of a tree. Just initials. Nothing grand, but lasting. Because in Deadwood, what matters most isn't the gunfights or gold. It's the pauses, the hands, the breath before speaking, the sound of your own footsteps when no one else is around. So if you were here just for a day, you might think it's quiet, but the dust knows. It remembers every step, every voice, every sigh into the wood grain of an old floorboard. The dust never lies. It settles slowly, soft as sleep, and it keeps everything, even you.